Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with the Eerie News, and today is August 26, 2024. Monday, August 26, 2024. Yes, a lot of eerie news out there to report. And we're going to start off with Stranger Than Fiction stories. And this is titled The Mystery of the Moors Murders. They were lovers, sadists, and serial killers. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley were predators that from 1963 to 1965 killed 5 young victims. The children were Pauline Reed, 16, John Kilbride, 12, Leslie Ann Downey, 10, and Edward Evans, 17. They were arrested after the death of Evans. All the victims' remains have been recovered except Keith Bennett, 12, who was taken on his way to his grandmother's house in 1964. Hindley died in 2002 and Brady in 2017. Until the end, he refused to say where the remains of Keith Bennett could be found. Throughout the years, the Bennett's family held out hope they would find Keith's bones somewhere out on Saddleworth Moor in Manchester. However, his mother Winnie died in 2012 with that wish unfulfilled. Saddleworth Moor is a lonely expanse named for a nearby parish. The moorland is acres of grazing land and peat bogs. In 1832, another notorious murder took place on the moors. There was a public house known as Bill O'Jack's, situated in the valley amongst the Saddleworth Hills. One of the victims was William Bradbury, 85, who went by the name of Bill O'Jack's, who owned the tavern. The other victim was his son Thomas, who was 47 years old. They were discovered by a young girl while they lay dying in a pool of their blood. Thomas had his skull broken, and he had 15 wounds on his head. His father received blows on the head, legs, and hands. Before he died, he said they were attacked by 5 Irishmen. It's believed they were beat with pokers, sword sticks, and a horse pistol. The men took money and several suits of clothes. A passerby who came upon the scene said the floor was covered with blood like a butcher's slaughterhouse. The walls of the rooms were splattered with human blood. A wooden staircase was covered with blood from the footmarks of the person who had come from the lower room. There he found both men dying and bruised. The surgeon, which had been called, said he could not render aid. The perpetrators of this crime were never caught. The Moorcock Inn, as the tavern was also known, was eventually demolished. In 1949, a plane crash on Saddleworth Moor scattered bodies on the hillside. There were only 8 survivors, 24 died. In 2014, a man who was not identified until a year later as David Litton, 67, had taken strychnine and was discovered near a hill known as Indian's Head. He had taken a train from London just to commit suicide on the moors. It was never known why he did this. In 2022, author Russell Edwards, an amateur sleuth, claimed he found what he believed was a makeshift grave with a skull nearby. The police responded to the area hoping to find the grave. Supposedly, Edwards had been searching the moors for several years, especially in an area known as Eagle Rock, which was visited by Brady in 1966 after he had been arrested. On September 29, 2022, the Greater Manchester Police searched the moors once again based on Edwards' claims. The remains were never found. Alan Bennett, Keith's brother, slammed the bogus report from Edwards, which had falsely raised the hopes of the family. Keith was last seen on June 16, 1964, when he was staying with his grandmother. Hindley lured the child to a van by asking for some help with boxes. Of the 5 children taken by Brady and Hindley, 4 were sexually molested. The first victim, Pauline Reed, 16, was not found until 1987. John Kilbride was found in 1965, since Brady had taken a photo of the child standing on the edge of his grave. Their third victim was Keith Bennett. Next was Leslie Ann Downey, only 10 years old, who was taken from a fairground in 1964. She was strangled, but not before being forced to pose for explicit photographs. They also recorded her final moments. The 16-minute tape was played at the trial of the murderous pair. Her body was the first to be discovered, as her arm was protruding from the ground. The final victim was Edward Evans, 17, who was lured to the couple's home along with David Smith, Myra's brother-in-law. He was also 17 and forced to watch as Brady hit Edward with an axe, used a cushion to smother him, and then strangle him with an electrical cord. David was married to Myra Hindley's sister Maureen, and they were hoping he would join them. He had his own troubled past and had been groomed by the pair prior to Evan's murder. What the pair hadn't counted on was that David actually had a conscience and was horrified by what he saw they had done. Fearing for his life, he helped Brady carry Evan's body into a spare bedroom. Once he had a chance, he ran home, told his wife what happened, and then called the police, describing in detail what he had witnessed. The police found Evan's body wrapped in plastic. At a Manchester train station, suitcases were found. Inside were porno photos of Leslie, as well as the recording of her murder. There was also a notebook in Brady's handwriting with the instructions on how to dispose of a body. The pair were convicted on May 16, 1966, of the murder of Kilbride, Downey, and Evans. They escaped execution by hanging by only a few months due to a change in the laws. Instead, they were to be imprisoned for life. In 1985, the investigation was reopened when they confessed to the murders of Pauline Reed and Keith Bennett. Myra Hindley served her sentence at Holloway Prison. She died behind bars in November 2002, age 60, from complications following a heart attack. Her remains were cremated. A banner was left at the entrance to the crematorium which read, "Burn in Hell." Ian Brady was declared criminally insane in 1985 and moved to a high-security hospital in Merseyside, where he went on a hunger strike in 1999, which didn't end until 2017, when he pulled out his nasal feeding tube 3 days before his death. Prior to this, he had been kept alive by being force-fed a liquid nutrition mix. He was known to routinely mock and abuse his nurses. His cause of death was listed as severe chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD. A judge ruled that his body was to be disposed of without any type of ceremony. His ashes were sealed in an urn and scattered in the Irish Sea. If there was any doubt that Brady was a psychopath, what followed his death should settle that question. Moments before he died, Brady gave his lawyer, Robin Macon, 2 locked Samsonite suitcases with instructions that only until after his death should they be opened. He'd kept them in his room all these years. However, a district judge stopped police from accessing them, pointing out that since Brady and Hindley could not be tried for the murder of Pauline or Keith, the point was moot since all the parties were deceased. This is unusual since the contents of the suitcases are unknown. The authorities were wondering if perhaps there was evidence of more victims. According to the book The Lost Boy, author Duncan Staff spoke to forensic psychiatrist Malcolm McCulloch, who interviewed Brady with the hope of learning where Keith Bennett was buried. And he received this reply from the killer, quote, "I know you don't know, you want to know, and I'm not going to tell you," end quote. In 2023, recovered long-lost letters written by Keith Bennett's mother, Winnie, to Myra Hindley revealed she agreed to take pentothal in order to find the boy's grave. This never took place, nor was she placed under hypnosis in an effort to jog her memory. Hindley helped find Pauline Reed's body in 1987. However, both killers could not remember where they had buried Keith. Sheffield University's Professor Tom Clark, who found the letter, said, "But by January 1993, she was very adamant she would not subject herself to the truth drug because she had been warned by Greater Manchester Police it could be harmful. She neglected to inform Winnie Johnson, and the Home Office chose not to break her confidence." And this. Let me tell you something. You look at this, police and judges, whose side are they on? And the same point that that judge made, which is, okay, both of these perpetrators are dead. But that very question of what if what was in that suitcase could provide answers, not only, let's say, to Keith Bennett, but what if there were more victims that were out there in the moors, just like they couldn't find Keith Bennett's body? What if there were more victims, cold cases that they even have? I don't understand what judge would do that. I mean, obviously, everybody's dead. this man, you're protecting the rights of a dead man? I don't know. And then the police are advising this lady, don't take pentothal and try to, so that you can find out, or hypnosis or whatever, so that you can maybe jog your memory and find out where you buried this little boy, to at least give this mother some comfort of recovering her son's body. It's like, whose side are they on? I don't know. Something wrong there in that equation. But I'll leave it at that. Okay, next story. This is also out of Stranger Than Fiction Stories, and this is titled The Mystery of the Mastodon. In 1887, there was a report of a living mastodon in Alaska. The story was that a party of miners had learned of the existence of living mastodons near the headwaters of the White River. Up to then, it was believed to be a fabrication of northern fur traders. The Stick Indians, or Sitka, told the miners that only 5 years before such animals had been seen by them. One of the Indians said that while hunting in an unknown section, he came across an immense track sunk to a depth of several inches in the moss. The way he described what he found, it resembled an elephant's track and was larger around than a barrel. The Indian followed the trail, which appeared to be fresh, and tracked one immense stride to another for a distance of some miles until he found what was making the tracks. When he saw what it was, he fled. The Indian warriors were known to be brave and would attack a grizzly, but this animal filled the hunter with great fear. He described it as being larger than Harper's Trading Store, with great shining yellowish tusks and a mouth large enough to swallow him at a single gulp. It had gone to a place where huge bones lay scattered. The area was at a very high altitude, rarely visited by people, and these would only be natives. It was already known that the mastodon inhabited the Yukon country, and their skeletons had been found strewn along the creeks. There's even a Mastodon Creek in Alaska. In 1901, a mastodon tusk, measuring 13 feet long and weighing nearly 306 pounds, was found on 80 Pup, a tributary of Honker Creek in the Klondike. Later that same year, a skeleton of a mastodon, complete with the exception of the small part of the vertebrae, arrived from Whitehorse. It was discovered by miners working at a depth of 80 feet in a shaft on Clark Creek, near the headwaters of the Stewart River. The skeleton was described as not fossilized, but very well preserved, with small bunches of hair clinging to it in places. It was estimated the animal was over 20 feet high. One of the tusks measured over 11 feet and weighed 215 pounds. The remains were consigned to Fortin and Company curio dealers at Seattle. Parts of Siberia, Alaska, and the Yukon were once connected in an area known as Beringia. The Bering Strait did not exist, enabling animals and eventually the first humans to cross into our continent. It is believed that humans arrived in what is now North America about 14,000 years ago. There's another mystery besides the question of prehistoric animals living into the modern age, and that is the story of the Stick Indians. Stick Indians were also known as Brush Indians, and were considered secretive, normally avoiding contact with regular people. They were part of the inland Athabascan tribe. It's unknown what spawned stories of Stick Indians being malevolent forest spirits. They are described in various ways by different tribes. The Salish say they were large, Bigfoot-like creatures, and the Cayuse and Yakama said they were dwarf-like. Stick Indians are believed to steal children, make wives of women, and eat people or enslave them, and take revenge on anyone that harms them, even if it's unintentional. Sometimes they are just described as being mischievous and who steal things. However, the pervasive belief is that you never want to anger them. According to the Salish, they dwell deep in the forests of the Northwest. Stick Indians are rarely seen and are nocturnal, and they do not speak like a person but mimic birds and animals. They don't live in a village but hunt and fish to feed themselves wherever they're at, and clothe themselves with deerskin. They are believed to have hypnotic powers of persuasion, and in some cases to cause insanity. Their favorite targets are people who are wandering alone, and they will entice a person by whistling or mimicking animal noises to lure them away. Children are especially vulnerable. Unusual disappearances are blamed on stick Indians. Like the skinwalker, Indians refuse to utter their name in the native language for fear that by doing so they are calling them forth. There are stories that just by whistling in the forest will call their attention. And by the way, I think that the stick Indians that they describe as the ones that talked about the Mastodon, I think that they were referring to the Sitka tribe, whereas these other stick Indians, which is like all the different tribes, I guess, have their version of what a stick Indian is like a totally, it's like a some type of being. It's not like two separate things, even though they're both referred to as stick Indians. All right. Next story is out of Mental Floss, and this is titled "It's Here." The house from Poltergeist is up for sale for the first time since 1979. The summer of 1982 was a banner one for director Steven Spielberg, whose family-friendly E.T. the Extraterrestrial smashed box office records. But Spielberg's darker side was on display as well with Poltergeist, another tale of suburban fantasy that saw family terrorized by paranormal entities. For people who might enjoy residing in a place where fictional horrors took place, the home used in the movie is now on the market for the first time since the film's release. Lauren Murdoch of Equity Union Real Estate is offering the property located in Simi Valley, California, listed at $1,174,999. Why don't they just make it an even $1,175,000? But okay. The 2,373 square foot home has 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and an in-ground pool. Fans may remember the latter feature as the site where unearthed skeletons terrorized the Freeling family, who didn't realize the property had been built over a Native American burial ground when they purchased it. The pool scene was filmed on a soundstage, and legends persist that prop makers used actual skeletons and invited the production's supposed curse. The real pool, thankfully, doesn't come with human remains. According to production designer Jim Spencer, Spielberg chose the house for its normalcy, which would make the ensuing horror all the more shocking. Stephen liked the house because it was the end of the road, Spencer said. Yeah, it was a 2-story valley-type mock Tudor, and it just fit everything. The neighborhood was what we call Spielbergia, where E.T. and a couple of his other films were shot. He always wanted to be in normal residential areas. For the most part, only exterior shots of the home were used. Interiors were mainly shot on sets since they often involved property destruction. Spielberg co-wrote and produced the film, which was directed by Tobe Hooper, who also did 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. At the time, rumors swirled that Spielberg had asserted control on set, essentially taking the directing reins from Hooper. Spielberg and Hooper have danced around the question over the years. In 2022, co-star JoBeth Williams observed that it seemed more like a collaboration. I think, in his heart of hearts, Spielberg would have loved to have directed it. Williams said he was always there, and Toby was not as experienced as Steven was. He very much listened to Steven's ideas about things because it was Steven's movie, really. And I'm sure there were times when it drove Toby crazy to have Steven so actively involved. But he never let on. They were both kind of there on the set. Toby would give direction. Sometimes Steven would add to that or give other direction. But I think it's fair to say that it was sort of a combo of the two of them, because certainly Steven was actively involved. The house was built in 1979 and has been occupied by its original owners ever since. Murdoch promises that the home is offered without the ghostly antics, which may disappoint some. It is, however, close to the 118 freeway just in case its occupants need to leave in a hurry. And if you look at the Eerie News for yesterday, the 25th, I specifically read about an article about how that movie Poltergeist is cursed. And if you go back to the day before, August 25th, and listen to it or watch it, you're going to see that I go into everything from not only the first Poltergeist movies, but all the way through. And also that rumor, they say rumor because nobody's confirmed it or denied it, that the skeletons that were used in the movie, especially that first one, were real human bones because I believe it was too expensive to get them made from plastic or rubber. And Jo Beth Williams herself said she found out about it later because when that part where she falls into the pool that's being dug up or dug in, she thought that they were, of course, plastic or rubber. And there's part of the story is that maybe the curse has to do with real human bones being used. But listen to it if you want the full story. But anyway, let's go back to Stranger Than Fiction stories. And this one is titled The Ghost of the Lost City of DeMille. In November 2017, a sphinx head standing 6 feet tall and weighing over 300 pounds was unearthed by 6 archaeologists. It's not thousands of years old. It's not even 100 years old. It was left behind in 1923 when Cecil B. DeMille filmed the silent movie The Ten Commandments on the sand dunes on the Central California coastline. DeMille had scouted out the area since January 1923 when he took a 6-week yachting trip to Tiburon Island to map out locations in Lower California. He decided the Guadalupe Napomo dunes would make an ideal backdrop to represent ancient Egypt. The dunes stretched across 22,000 acres without roads or other signs of modern civilization. It lay approximately 150 miles north of Los Angeles. The set was designed by Paul Eerie, a founder of the French Art Deco movement. A few months later, DeMille used over 3,000 workers to build his City of Pharaohs, whose completion coincided with the discovery of King Tut's tomb in Egypt. DeMille also hired 100 dressmakers who worked on the top floor of the old Lasky laboratory in preparing the thousands of costumes required for the movie. Animals and extras that numbered in the thousands were used during those summer months. The set towered 110 feet over the dunes and encompassed 800 feet. The statue of Ramses II alone weighed 40 tons. During production, a tent city known as Camp DeMille was erected, which housed the workers, actors, along with a hospital, several restaurants, including a kosher one, and a private police force to make sure bad publicity did not leak out during the filming due to hijinks from the thousands of personnel working there. With over 5,000 people running around, there was bound to be trouble in some form or another. Others took advantage of the 200 camels on the set to ride into town where they visited the local speakeasies. Pre-production expenses were in the range of $700,000, which in those days was a fortune. The amount would eventually surpass $1.4 million. The production started in May and was completed by September 1923. DeMille, not wanting any other directors to use his dune set and replicate the setting of his blockbuster, ordered his crew to cover the entire set in sand. Dynamite and bulldozers pushed what was left of the city into large trenches. Covered were 21 plaster sphinxes, each weighing 5 tons, the backdrops, the massive Pharaoh's Gate, the palace, and the pyramids. The effects of wind, rain, and sand through the years obscured their location for the next 60 years, and they lay buried in the scenic coastal dunes, becoming known as the Lost City of DeMille. Others believed the decision to destroy the set was also due to economics, since he was under contract to leave the land as he found it. The production was over budget, and this was the cheapest way to honor the agreement. DeMille did not return to the large set in 1956 when he directed the newer version starring Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner. He died 3 years later. Director Peter Brosnan set out to find the ruins in the 1980s, though excavation didn't begin until several years later. The dunes stretched nearly 30 miles across 2 counties, and not until he spoke to an old ranch hand who herded cattle through the dunes for years did he catch a break on finding the lost city. The man took him to what the locals named the dune that never moves. A statue poked through the sand. It turned out to be a portion of the horse design from the temple's edifice. By then, wind erosion had uncovered part of it, and along with liquor bottles and tobacco tins, excavators unearthed several sphinxes out of the 21 that were built for the set. Brosnan had to negotiate with the local bureaucracy and getting permission to excavate from the local council and 13 ranchers who owned the property. By 1989, the land had been sold to a nature conservatory, and he had to start again in regards to gaining access to the land. The head of a sphinx was discovered in 2012. Then the team returned to unearth the body in 2017. They found another one instead, which took 8 days to remove. Everyday things were also found, like bottles of cough syrup, which were probably used to hold alcohol, since these were the years of Prohibition. Brosnan's 2017 documentary, The Lost City of Cecil B. DeMille, tells the story of the project, including interviews with residents who witnessed the filming in 1923. Some have seen Cecil B. DeMille's ghost at this old set. He often stated that his first Ten Commandments film was his favorite. Some feel this is the reason why he haunts these dunes. DeMille was a flamboyant character that always wore riding boots, khaki breeches, and a broad brim hat while he directed his films. Witnesses state that they have seen his figure dressed in this attire standing in front of his old set, his feet firmly planted in the sand. His ghost is known to motion to witnesses to move. Some speculate he felt he was directing them. Other witnesses have stated that his ghost glared at them while they talked. It seems he is aware of the living. Present day, the movie set is a registered archaeology site and wildlife refuge in the farm town of Guadalupe, 8 miles northwest of Santa Maria. The Dune Center works on excavating items unearthed from the massive set. The mineral composition of the sand in the dunes helped to preserve artifacts meant to endure for only a few months. But not all the statues of the film were destroyed. 2 of the great sphinxes were spared and transported to the Santa Maria County Club and placed at the entrance. There was a sign erected next to the statues which read, "Santa Maria Valley, the Ten Commandments filmed here." The statues are no longer there, but the club is still at Waller Lane, just off what is now Broadway, which during the 1920s was part of the original Highway 101. And this is something that DeMille said, if 1,000 years from now archaeologists happen to dig beneath the sands of Guadalupe, the director teased, I hope they will not rush into print with the amazing news that Egyptian civilization extended all the way to the Pacific coast. There you go. So there we have it, and that is Eerie News for today, August 26, 2024, and I will be back soon with some more interesting and unusual news. Until then.